I would wake up every day as a kid to like her just singing opera. That's how she'd wake us up. She'd be like, "Oh, wake up, Benjamin!" But she'd have a British accent because she's British.
Welcome to College Chats. Today I have Mr. Ben Shapiro here joining me. Ben, thank you so much for hopping on, and I really appreciate your time. To give everybody a background of who you are, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurship people have already heard your name, but for the people that are maybe in different majors like computer science, whatever it may be, trying to dive deeper into that space, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'll do a quick recap of the last 24 years. So I was born in Germany to a British opera singer and American academic, lived there for a while, came back over to the US, spent a lot of time abroad. We'd basically spend 2 to 3 months of every year out in Europe or around the world, going to South America, South Africa, etc. Really cool experience. Learned a lot from that. I was a jock for about 8 years, and then I went to a community theater show, and I was like, oh, that looks fun. I'm going to dive into that. So then I went pretty heavy on acting, singing, and dancing. I got into a conservatory high school for the arts and spent 4 to 5 hours every day doing acting, singing, and dancing classes. And I originally got into SDSU and NYU and Cal Arts, a couple other places. I ended up choosing SDSU because all the other schools were $50,000 to $80,000 for a theater degree. Got into SDSU for that. Dropped that major pretty quickly, went undeclared. I joined a fraternity, had a bit too much fun, didn't go to classes, got kicked out for having a 0.9 GPA. So it took me about 6 months to realize how much I had messed up. And after that, I made a plan to get back into SDSU, told me it was going to take 2 years. I was like, no way, I'm waiting 2 years to get back into college. I did it in a year. I got into the Lavin entrepreneurship program with two goals in mind. Number one was find a community of badass people who were doing really cool stuff and were really motivated, hardworking, smart. And those people would inspire me to do things and teach me things. Like one of my big philosophies is always surround yourself with people who are better than you in certain ways. And second goal was learn how to build a business. So really quickly, within the first 2 weeks, I had found a team and 3 ideas for businesses. We actually had a couple more than that, but there was a competition coming up that we submitted 3 ideas to. The director of the program said only one of those might have some roots. So we ran with that idea in the competition. We won. That ended up being TechMate. That turned into my first business that I founded, along with 3 other Lavins. We got into the Zip Launchpad, and we went for about 2 years, and we had some really solid success. Unfortunately, made the decision to shut that down. I say unfortunately because it was sad, but it was the right choice. And I started working with another startup founded by SDSU and Lavin graduate called Endera that builds commercial electric shuttles, school buses, box trucks like U-Hauls, party bus size. I was the 3rd or 4th person on that team. So it was like me, the co-founder, the founder, and a couple other people. And I've been with them until February of this year. And now I'm doing product management, which is really like a lot of design, a lot of user research, a lot of marketing too that I've been doing, working on value props and customer persona, market research, etc. And I'm working with a couple AI startups, and I'm doing a couple workshops on AI and no-code tools. Since I've been a geek since high school, I was nicknamed Inspector Gadget, and I started doing freelance tech consulting. Yeah, that's a quick summary of
That
the
was a
past 24
very
years.
solid overview. I did have a question because you're from Germany. First, at what age did you come here from Germany?
I was 5.
Okay. So do you still think that you remember any cultural differences between when you were there and
I
here?
do, especially like there's just big differences between the EU and here. I've also been back there many times, pretty much every year, to go and see family and friends all over Europe. So there's definitely some solid differences that I've noticed.
And then I also noticed that I've spoke to a bunch of other sort of Lavin alumni, and they all seem to have the commonality of they're all doing great right now, doing something related to like technology, doing something related to like startup work. I talked to Jasmine through your referral. And then I also talked to another person, Caitlin, who was also in Lavin. Apparently, I don't know if you were in the same class. She works at Republic. But I've just noticed that everybody that was in Lavin is apparently a go-getter. Is that what you've experienced when you were in the program too? Just like you saw these people around and you're just like, I'm in the right place?
Yes, overall. We
Mm,
had 40 something students, I think, or maybe 35 to 40 students. Out of those, I'd say 40 to 50% were like really in there to either start a business or join a startup. The other percent was not really that dedicated to it. At least that's how I felt. But that's
mhm.
still 15 to 20 people that are there doing some really cool stuff, really motivated. And yeah, there's a lot of people in my class, classes above me and below that are doing some really great things. And that's not just because they're smart and motivated, but one of the great things from that you get from the Lavin program is a network. And
Mhm.
that is one of the biggest factors in your success during college and after college, especially.
When you were going into art, when did you originally find yourself being interested in that space? Did you like naturally have a talent for it per se? You know how certain like artists, or I guess this is for singing and maybe even like for musicians, they have like perfect pitch or whatever it's called. Did you have some sort of a waking moment where you're just like, I think I'll be really good at it, and then you just pursued it that way?
Yeah, I think I did have some inherent like genetic talent because my mom's an opera singer and a really good singer. And I would wake up every day as a kid to like her just singing opera. That's how she'd wake us up. She'd be like, "Oh, wake up, Benjamin!" But she'd have a British accent because she's British.
It's
So I was
funny.
just around that all the time. And then I got into the program, and at least on the singing side, I had some natural talent. My talent, it was singing, then acting, and then dancing. I'm not a very like limber, fluid person, especially now since I haven't been dancing in a long time.
It's
But I really loved the work I was doing. It was really creative. And also, once I started getting some leading roles, there's a process that you go through in understanding the character that you're playing and the environment that you're in and how you yourself would react in those situations that I think has been really helpful in me doing that same analysis, but in like real life situations. And then also public speaking, like just getting in front of a stage. I think the most people I sang in front of was 5,000 at the Spreckles Theater. And so
wow.
doing that has really helped me be confident getting in front of larger groups or smaller groups.
Yeah, that's apparent because I've noticed for every single time that I've seen you speak, even in the Zooms, it's like you don't really even stutter. It feels like everything is fluid, everything is in story mode. So that's a very kind of
That's good
observation
to
that I
hear
had.
because in my head, I'm like, I'm catching myself saying the ums. I'm
Interesting.
thinking to myself, like, oh, is this being communicated well? Like, I will often ask, do you understand? Are you interpreting what I'm saying the same way that I'm trying to communicate it?
Mhm.
But it's good to hear that it sounds fluid.
Yeah, it does. And also, just to follow up on when you are talking about you take up a persona in acting, for example, and then you said you can transfer those skills almost to real life. Do you still see yourself doing that almost like in a way like you see your future self doing this entrepreneurial work and then you like self-actualize into that person? Do you think that's how it would work, or how do you describe that?
I think that's a good practice and something I've been trying to do more. I think there's a lot of advice out there of identify who you want to be and then be that. If you read like Atomic Habits, he talks about that. You need to change your identity to be
Mm,
that person you want to be instead of saying, "Oh, I'd like to be someone who works out 5 days a week and is healthy." I am someone who works out 5 days a week and is healthy and takes care of themselves. I think more so like where I put a lot more of that skills nowadays is into like situational analysis. So like when
mhm.
I'm dealing with somebody, whether it's a personal or professional relationship, and there's feelings involved, which there pretty much always is, I'm asking myself, okay, like how am I feeling about this? How do I think this other person is feeling? What are their goals? What are my goals? What are other circumstances that might be affecting this? And how do we find a outcome that suits both of us?
And then I want to now get into probably your favorite topic to talk about, which is artificial intelligence. First of all, what do you think of when you think of artificial intelligence? Because there's obviously like a Google definition of it, but I feel like everybody thinks of it in different ways. So I want to get your perspective first.
Yeah, it's such a huge field. I think what most people think of when someone says AI is a chatbot or like some type of intelligence that's speaking to you, whether that's text or audio or video. But as I've learned a lot more about AI, there's artificial intelligence and models in pretty much every single thing that we do. In compression, there's so much AI that's being used in social media and advertisement to keep us engaged with the platform or serve us ads that we're most likely to click on and actually purchase from. So there's a lot that falls into that. I think most recently, what everyone's been talking about, and what I've been diving into the most, is generative AI. So things Dolly or Midjourney that's creating art and images from text. There's also text to video. There's ChatGPT, which probably I hope everyone's heard about. And if they haven't, they should check it out. So that's what I've been diving into. When I've been learning about this, not just in terms of the high level use cases, I'm somebody who likes to know how things work. So I've been diving into the different types of models like supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning, and the whole ML ops, machine learning operations industry that's responsible for training and deploying and monitoring these models from like early conception to they're actually being used by users.
And then I feel like from my end, when I think of AI, I think of it being at the very core, like logic or rationale written through code that makes things happen so that a need is solved or like a problem is solved that a user on the client side would want. Because I have a sort of a slight coding background because I've learned a little bit of, and so that's the easiest way for me to wrap my head around. But the one thing I couldn't wrap my head around is the idea of these neural networks. Have you heard of those?
Yep.
You know about those? Because to me, it seems like neural networks are basically you're building these massive related data points through linking them the way that a brain would link them is basically.
It's essentially tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of models in different layers that are communicating with each other. So my mentor has this really good example, and hopefully I don't butcher it, but you're a toddler and somebody throws a baseball at you or you're throwing a baseball. You have never thrown a baseball before. So you don't have any data on
Yeah.
how this specific object moves through time. So what's going to happen if somebody throws one to you? You're probably not going to catch it. Or maybe
Yeah.
you'll catch it like here.
Or you'll get hit. That's
It's
why I was laughing.
right. It's not going to go well. But you do have data as a toddler on, okay, I know what gravity's like. I know that there's wind that affects certain things that are thrown, maybe frisbees or a paper airplane. I know that I need to account for how fast somebody's arm is moving. So you have all of these different layers that are giving you data. And as you start to get balls thrown at you and you throw balls more, you're getting more and more data on specifically how this object interacts with all these other layers, and you're able to get better and better at the outcome that you want. And so that's what's happening with neural networks when you look at like Tesla, or I'm trying to think of other ones. That's the first one that comes to mind. That's
Even
the
like
way I think about it.
Zooks, have you seen those self-driving, like no driver passenger vehicles only? They're all passenger seats facing each other. They're four-wheel. It's like the company's called Zooks or Zooks.
I haven't
They're
heard
big
of
in
that.
like the San Francisco area, and I think they've actually started they've deployed some of their vehicles to start like actually taking people around. But it's like they're competing against like Google, a couple other players, obviously Tesla for what is it called? Mobility tech or something like that. Zooks is the name for that. But I do want to get into because of our topic on AI neural networks. Do you read like books on these things before? Because I've looked it through Amazon and tried to find books on AI, machine learning, neural networks, all that stuff, but it seems like it isn't like a huge space. James Clear's like Atomic Habits, it's not as popular.
Yeah, I think there's probably some good books out there. I have not looked into that. I've moved away from books for like technical skills, especially, and more towards podcasts and videos and online courses because they're quicker to capture. If I like look at a book nowadays, it's usually I get a summary of it. Same thing for mindfulness and those types of things. Like I listen to a lot of neuroscience and psychology podcasts instead of reading books on them now. There's a course that I took from Andrew Ng, who's one of the most prominent and well-known experts on AI and machine learning. I took that on Coursera, and that was great because you're getting some quality video content, and then you actually get to go and build things in a coding environment. And that's the way that I learn best. I'd say that and YouTube have been my main sources of knowledge for AI. There's also a couple newsletters that I subscribe to. I'm trying to think of the name. The only one that's popping to my mind right now is You Probably Need a Robot.
Mhm.
And that's one I recently subscribed to. They've got a Discord community as well. And I've been really enjoying that community and their newsletters.
Perfect. And then I'll definitely check out some of the kind of resources and podcasts you mentioned. As far as what you're working on now, you did mention that you were working on a couple AI projects. You gave us a general overview of what you thought of like the field of AI. What do you like to do with AI with your current job?
So I just like to play around with it a lot and see what I can do with it. There's so much. I got this huge like database of all these different use cases and tools that I try out or that I hear about and I want to try out. Some things I'm doing right now is I'm using GPT-4 to create marketing content. So like blogs, social media headlines, and copy. I'm doing the same for one of my other clients. I also was playing around with using GPT-4 to actually create a comprehensive digital marketing plan. So that's like email, that's text marketing, it's paid ads, SEO optimization, seeing what it can give me, and some pretty good step by step instructions and examples there. And also, what I've probably been spending the most amount of time in is
Mhm.
using Midjourney to create web design and actual images for websites. And then taking those images, using them for clients or for my own kind of personal projects that I'm doing and putting them onto my portfolio.
Yeah, I love Midjourney. I've checked it out before and I've used it to create a couple landing pages myself. So it's like when I first used it, it was like this, it blew my mind. I don't know how effective it compares against, like you said, there was other ones like Dolly. What do
Yeah,
you
I
think is
think
the difference
Midjourney is
between
the
them?
best that's out there right now.
Yeah, I saw Midjourney's like quality of photos and I'm like, what? It's insane.
Especially
And
if
so I
you're
use,
paying for it, you can access their version 5 that just came out. I
mhm,
think this week, might have been last week. And that, like, one of the issues version 4 had was with high quality images of, or realistic images of people, the hands would get messed up a lot of the times and the limbs. So that's a lot better. What I'm trying to see if it can do better now is image to image, where I can give it a headshot of myself or
mhm.
somebody else and then ask it to keep that person in there but make stylistic changes. I've only tried it with one person so far and it hasn't been that good. But there's other tools that are better for that specific use case.
All these companies, all these sort of startups and the world itself, if they start like adopting this AI tech to essentially make everything more efficient and less costly, for example, their marketing, their other like coding through co-piloting and stuff. Once everyone does it, do you really think that with, let's say, marketing, that a company would be able to differentiate or have real value from this AI if everything is automated at that point? Because if everybody is doing it, then what is going to make, at the end of the day, a customer still choose that company?
Yeah, I think there's going to be that issue. If a company is just using AI and they don't have a skilled team that's taking the ideas from the AI and the general content of the AI output and then customizing that and making it unique, yeah, things are going to just become really bland. And I would imagine, I'm
Mhm.
assuming that's going to have an effect on the actual performance of whatever content people are delivering. But it could be the case that it's good enough that people don't care that much about the unique style of it. That's going to be interesting to see. I think that's not going to be the case. I think people will care that there's a unique style, and there's going to be companies that come out and they're using AI to generate, to speed up their work and speed up like the foundational work. And then they are really skilled at customizing that work, getting exactly what they want out of the AI, and then making it something really special. So there's a lot less time now that needs to go into like generating ideas for images
Yeah.
or blogs. And so that time that's saved can go into making those really special.
And what do you think about the actual quality of the ideas generated? Because you know how the general nature of machines themselves is when they create something, it's typically created through the combination of already known data points. So it almost feels like the new output is just a regurgitation in a different format of the same data points. Whereas I feel like a human actually creates something that is outside of the box, the virtual box that a machine thinks out of. So do you think that a machine at some point via AI or whatever it may be, do you think that they can at one point start creating these out of the box ideas that can eventually like lead to startup ideas? Do you think that can happen at some point?
Short answer is yes. I think we'll get to the point where AI can come up with brand new creative ideas that haven't been seen before. And there's a lot of different ways that creativity can happen. It can be piecing together two things that haven't been pieced together before or improving on something. I think GPT-4 has scored a lot higher on the creativity aspect, but it's still not close to really what a skilled human can do. But it's going to get better. GPT 3.5 came out 4 or 5 months ago, I think, and GPT 4 is already out 4 months later. And it's an incredible amount of improvement. So we're going to get to that point, but I think there's still going to be a place for people to be creative.
And I'm sure the from the 4 months that kind of that time frame, I'm sure the millions of users that are using GPT, you said 3.5, influenced the learning somewhat, right? Doesn't it take some feedback as well from the users? I was trying to think of what the real effect of all these people putting in their user inputs and if that is what results in basically GPT and OpenAI being so huge and just like expanding at this exponential rate.
Yeah, so I was having a conversation with a data scientist last night about the way that GPT is trained and then the way that Alpaca is trained, which is a model that came out of some Stanford researchers.
Hmm.
And what they did with Alpaca was they took Lambda, which is a smaller model that Google has released, and then GPT-4, and they used GPT-4 to do prompt engineering to train the smaller model. And
That is
because
weird.
GPT is this huge model that has a ton of data that's been fed into it, a ton of training, you can use it to train smaller models and create a more efficient model. So that's a really interesting use case that's popping up now where people are able to create these like very efficient, small, hyper focused models using bigger models. And then on the point of how GPT-4 is trained, you can rate like a thumbs up or thumbs down on comments or outputs from
Oh,
GPT.
I've seen that. I've heard that. It's like verticalized models. I feel like I've seen a company or a startup try to be the middleman of the OpenAI like GPT database, and then they're basically doing exactly what you're doing, but they're gonna like even not actually train it, but it'll provide you the training services itself, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's weird. If I knew more of this like AI stuff, I would probably be able to explain it better. This stuff just blows my mind.
It sounds similar to something that one of my clients is doing where
Hmm.
we are going to be launching a platform where users who want have a business idea that they want to do utilizing GPT or utilizing Dolly, maybe Midjourney too, but I think we're going to start with Dolly or GPT. They can work with us to identify a use case, train one of those models to their specific use case, and create a website
Yeah,
where
yeah.
users can actually use that model for whatever use case and generate revenue. Which so that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
We're
it's like a
taking a model and
verticalized
training
AI
it.
as a service almost. I did have one more question, and this pertains to more so as of your journey in the past and where you are now. What do you think was the most instrumental part of where you are now? Do you have any like points of failures that you want to recommend students not to get into? What are some recommendations that you would have to perhaps your former self even?
Yeah. On the topic of failures, I think, I look back at I getting kicked out of school and a relationship I had that was a failure and shutting down my company. Those all were really tough times, but those are also like significant points in my life where once I was able to work through them and dive deep into like introspection and reflection, I made some huge positive changes that I hope I would have made otherwise, but probably if I did, it would take longer. And I would not go back and change those things. I would want to act a different way,
Hmm.
but I also learned so much from them that I'm content with the way that they went. That's not to say I don't have regrets, but yeah, don't be afraid of failure. Have a growth mindset. Good thing to Google and take a look at fixed versus growth mindset. I think just being like a social person, even though like I've gotten less extroverted and I really like my alone time now, but being somebody who's just politely kicking down doors and being like, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing, can we talk? And building those relationships and coming back to those initial conversations and being like, hey, like I took what you said, I disagree with some of it, here's why, I agree with some of it, here's why, here's what I've done. That's a huge thing when you're building relationships. I think people get a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, like I want to learn from you, I want your help doing this, and then nothing happens with that. I've done that
Mm.
sometimes, but I think overall I've done a really good job of coming back with action and not just like ideas or thoughts. Those are important, but I think action is really important too.
You touched on an interesting point. You phrase it as action, but I feel like it falls into also then falls into the category of adding back value to the person you're essentially asking for help from. I feel like a lot of people, for the most part, they would like to see value add back when they're like doing conversation with just like even a student. But I feel like there are people that are more in the giving, they're more philanthropic by nature, and so they'd be more than happy to like have conversations or help you out in something just because they're just nice people. But I feel like you would fall into the, 10 to 25% category there. Cause I don't know why else you would be coming back to ES, all these like different speaker events with Tamid and doing this stuff too. So appreciate that from your end.
Yeah, I think like with the workshops and just the mentoring and things like that, I do get value out of it because I'm learning about unique founders, like challenges that they're going through. I'm learning about their industries. I'm honing my own skills on entrepreneurship and product development. But also, it just feels good to give back because I got so much from the people who hosted workshops or mentored me, and I still go to those things and have those relationships and get a lot out of it. And it's awesome to be able to do the same. Sometimes I still get like imposter syndrome, but I try to work through that and acknowledge my gaps of knowledge and my weaknesses and provide what I can.
I already deal with imposter syndrome, but I bet as soon as I graduate and I go into the real world, it's going to be a ton of it, especially if my clubs and stuff start inviting me back and speaking or whatever. But that kind of wraps it up for my end, Ben. Any other points or questions I should have asked you? What do you think?
So I did a workshop at Mead last semester talking about the characteristics of successful people. It might have been specific to entrepreneurs, but I think what I said also applies to people. And I'd say one piece of advice or one quality that I've done a lot of work in strengthening and I would recommend to other people is mindfulness and introspection and
Mhm.
moderation. And by moderation, I don't mean like doing things in moderation, the ability to moderate yourself, adapt
Mm.
yourself depending on the situation and your needs and other people's needs. I get a lot of comments from people when I tell them how old I am that are surprised that I'm 24, that I usually get like 28 or 29. When I had a full beard, it was like 30. And I think a big part of that is the work that I've done in being mindful and how that allows me to be compassionate with others, to be open about my weaknesses, and I hope also be humble while still being confident. So starting to really reflect on like who you are and reflect on your failures, I think that's an important thing to start doing early on. And if you can get to a point where you have identified your strengths and your weaknesses and your insecurities, and then you can work on those, you're on a really good path to be happy with yourself, and then also just be happy with other people in a personal or professional context. Yeah, one last thing, and I'll ask you to put this in the link. So if anybody's interested in building a business or an app on top of GPT or Dolly, so like AI art generation type of stuff, the company I'm working with is opening up a program where you get to use that platform I was talking about earlier to quickly build and train a model on top of GPT or Dolly and create a website where you can start testing out your business idea or your product idea, hopefully create some revenue. I'll ask you to put a Google form in the link
Yep.
where if anybody's interested, they can sign up, and then we'll do a webinar or workshop talking a bit more about exactly how this is going to work. But that's going to be happening, I think in 2 weeks, we're going to close it. We've already got like 150 people
Ooh,
interested. We're shooting for
nice.
300. This will be a really cool opportunity. And you don't have to have an idea. We'll talk
Mhm.
about potential use cases in our workshop. So,
Thank you so much for the tips, and hopefully whoever's watching on the other end can definitely take that into account. And also, I'll put anything in terms of like your LinkedIn URL into the description for anybody interested in reaching out and talking about all these things you talked about, including AI. Thank you so much, Ben.
yeah, thank you.